Okay, as soon as you look at the title of the story, 31 beautiful green trees, before even reading the story, what kind of story do you expect to have? What kind?
Something
A
maybe
positive one.
Positive one? Okay, why would you say positive? Inspired?
Like a green, beautiful green trees. Like she's referring like to colors and to nature.
Okay, so you have the natural element, you have the aesthetic element also as well, something beautiful, something that would make you happy. What about the opening of the story? Notice what she started before telling the story. Let me say why I decided to write it and set it down precisely as it happened to me, just as I have lived it and felt it moment by moment until they brought me to this terrible place. Okay, so isolated from the world that I have become wholly convinced that there is no hope for ever being released until it be to go to the world of the dead. Who is talking at the beginning? Do we know who is
uh,
talking?
the narrator is writing her story in the beginning.
Okay, the narrator is writing her story in the beginning, and then the setting is quite important. You already have a reference of the setting in the title. Sorry, 31 beautiful green trees. But by contrast, what do we have? A reference to this terrible place. Do we have an indication on what this terrible place is about? Do we have any information?
Not explicitly, but it can be inferred throughout the writing.
Okay, it can be inferred, and later on we discover where the place is. And then, why would somebody decide to write the story and set it down precisely as it happened? What would be the implication of that? If I say I'm going to write my story and I'm going to write it exactly as it happened, why? What would be maybe autobiographical element? Okay, but why focus on precisely as it happened? What would be the possibilities?
Because maybe people
For
misunderstood her.
credibility.
Credibility, because maybe people would not really believe in what she's saying. Why would people not believe someone? Maybe we don't know yet that it's a woman. Later on, we're going to find out. Why would somebody not believe something you say or write about?
Because there is it's يعني more of subjective. There is no evidence that it really happened, and it's not a fact or something. It's something from a person's perspective.
Subjectivity, or maybe related to gender. Maybe because it's a woman who's writing, we discover that maybe women are not taken seriously when they write. Thus, it was that I said to myself, write it, my girl Karima Fahmi. Write your story in detail and hide it in some safe place, perhaps in the mattress, having scooped out a little hole in one of its sides. So maybe one day someone will find the pages you've written and will feel pity for you, realizing how wretched you were when wrongly and by force they put you in this place because you preferred silence, everlasting silence, the day when you decided to cut off your little tongue, that simple lump of flesh which you were always giving vent to words and thoughts. Very important element here. Why is she addressing herself? Write it, my girl. Write it, Karima Fahmi. Write your story in detail. If somebody wants to write his or her own story, why does she have to hide it in a safe place? Why? What would be the reason?
Can we say because women were condemned from speaking out? And so
Okay,
therefore,
because women were condemned when speaking up. Okay, and then why would somebody once written and you will feel pity for you? Why request a feeling of pity? Why want to have a feeling of pity? Why would the woman want other people to pity her? Isn't it degrading? Isn't it dehumanizing? What would you usually expect her to say?
to understand that it was not her fault and she was got there against her will.
Okay, maybe she was a victim. But I say it's pity degrading, dehumanizing. What should the woman require instead of pity? Respect, dignity,
Justice.
justice, exactly. But here she's talking about justice wrongly and by force, that she's innocent. And why? Because she preferred silence. Notice how they're playing around with silence versus writing. She cannot express herself verbally. How would she express herself in writing? Because she decided to cut off her tongue, a little lump of flesh where she was said she used to give vent to words, thoughts. Why one would
Doctor,
yes.
can we see that she is alienated when she said, so I isolated from the world? So isolated am I from the world?
Yes, exactly. She's isolated, she's alienated, nobody maybe would listen to her. Before maybe she wanted to speak, and then she was using her tongue to speak, basically to talk about her words, her thoughts, but maybe that led her to trouble. This is why one day she decided to cut off her tongue. And if somebody decides to do that, how is that person viewed? That person is viewed as what kind of person? Normal or abnormal?
Psychotic and abnormal, maybe.
Maybe psychotic and abnormal. Okay.
Why abnormal, doctor? No, she preferred to keep her secrets for her, so why did we consider her abnormal?
Abnormal because she wanted to cut her tongue to hurt herself physically. Is it a normal reaction to want to cut your tongue off?
No.
No. Okay. So maybe in her reaction she was abnormal. Maybe we're going to see that it's because she lives in a patriarchal society that led her to want to cut off her tongue, because usually in a patriarchal society women are silenced. So if women are silenced, she goes along with that society and decides to cut off her tongue, and that would add to her alienation. Let's read the next paragraph. I shan't speak of this hellish place. It's being repeated in this paragraph. I shan't speak of this. I shan't describe. I shan't do it. But in fact, what is she doing? She's describing
She's
this.
doing it anyway.
She's doing it anyway. So speaking in contrast to writing, and then the feeling about the gray walls. Notice there is going to be a contrast in the setting between the 31 beautiful green trees, how colorful they are, and in contrast to what? In contrast to the gray color. Okay, and you're going to have this later on when she describes the city and the flood in the city and the impact of the flood on the city. So what we have is basically the description of the setting, the function of the setting is going to be quite important in that reading. What about the experience of a person basically who thinks that the wall are closing off and shutting off her breathing and falling on her body? What kind of person would think like that?
A mentally sick person?
Exactly, a mentally sick person. And then so a mentally sick person, and we don't know whether she's really mentally sick. We have description, with her feelings, her fears and all of that would reveal it, but we don't know the cause of it yet. Then she
Uh,
so the fat lady, how does she describe the fat lady? What connotation does this lady have? The chin rounded like the small egg of a serpent. She plunges the horrible injection in my bag, but she would laugh because she doesn't want her to think that this lady triumphed over her. What do
She
you have?
describes her in a negative way, like she's someone who's malicious.
Okay, exactly. And what do you assume? This person is what? What kind of person do we have? Do we know what the place is so far? Can we guess now?
She might be the nurse taking care of her.
Exactly. In what kind of place? Is it a
In a
hospital?
rehab
Hospital or an asylum or a rehab center.
Exactly, for mentally sick maybe people. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Is it normal to think about the food as filthy poisoned food before they put before me? Again, this is typical of mentally sick people. They think that objects are coming to kill them, to choke them. They think that the food people give them would be what kind of food? Would be a poisoned food. And notice we have a second reference to nature. What was the first reference to nature in the reading so far? What was the first reference to nature?
the sparrow.
Before that, the 31 beautiful green trees. Now the sparrow. Analyze her reaction towards the sparrow when the sparrow eats a piece of bread. How does she react? Is it an overreaction?
She
Doctor,
did not
can you
want him.
repeat the
She doesn't want the sparrow to be poisoned.
Okay, but is it the fact that the food will poison the sparrow?
No, but to show that she cares a lot about nature, maybe.
Okay, maybe to show that she cares a lot about nature. Can we say there is another possibility that there is some kind of identification between her and the sparrow? She's afraid that they would poison her. In the same manner, she projects those feelings onto the sparrow and she thinks that maybe they will be poisoned, the sparrow will be poisoned. Maybe she sees herself in the sparrow, and then this is why she weeps bitterly. Is it an overreaction? In the same way that she had an overreaction, can we say, when she saw the trees that were cut? What kind of person is she?
Extremely sensitive and emotional.
Exactly, extremely sensitive and emotional, to the point where people might judge her as what kind of person? A mentally sick person. Maybe because she's a woman living in a conventional society. Okay, had she had the same reaction maybe in a different country, not in Cairo, in a different place, maybe people would not judge her in the same manner. I shan't speak about all that. Theme of being forced to live in that terrible place. So we have coercion, we have oppression. So she's not going to talk about, basically she feels that her head is going to blow up. Then she's going to confine herself to write about what happened to her before living in that place. And she introduces the theme of metamorphosis. The theme of metamorphosis that she explains is related to the external setting. She's going to draw a parallel between the external and the internal, how the setting externally would have an impact on her emotionally and inside herself. The things that were changing around her and the way they would affect her internally within herself. And notice what we have is basically she was an employee at the water company. Notice the choice of water company. The author could
It's
have
an element of nature,
exactly
water.
an element of nature. So we're going to have the water company being destructive on the emotional level, and we see also the flood being destructive, affecting both people, things, animals, and plants. So a major theme of that reading would be the interaction between people, the setting, nature, animals, and plants. 31 beautiful green trees is the aesthetic, the beautiful. The water company is going to be destructive. What do we have? The flood is going to be destructive when it comes to the city, and the destruction of the city because of the flood would have also an impact on her emotionally. Yeah, the next section. This was the very important theme. What theme is reflected in that paragraph? My beautiful city. How do we interpret my beautiful city? How do we interpret my beautiful city?
Yeah, she has the love to the place she is in.
Okay, so a feeling of belonging basically in contrast to alienation. The alienation in the asylum the alienation in that place, and my beautiful city, it is hers, so a oneness with her, but she's saying goodbye to her beautiful city because the flood had destroyed it. They're going to introduce the concept called in humanistic geography something that we called topophilia. Topophilia, can you guess what topophilia is? Topos is
The human geography.
place, okay, and philia is love. So the love of place. So she's expressing the love of place, the love of her beautiful city, basically. And this is why when she talks about it as farewell, farewell, my beautiful city, the feeling of belonging, in contrast to the alienation that we have in relation to the asylum. Next paragraph, please. I first noticed, very important. Thank you. Now, she establishes a contrast in the setting between what and what. What kind of walls did she have in the asylum? Gray walls, darkness. In contrast, what do we have in the city before the flood? What do you have? Colors, bright
lights, colors.
Exactly. Colors, bright light, colors, and all of that. And the happiness of roaming around the city, eating basically seeds and other things to eat, the nuts and all of that. So the orange, the sparkling blue, and all of these, the brightness of that of the city, walking in the city. But when the flood advances, things would start changing. Okay, when the advance of the flood started, okay, what kind of change? So the theme of metamorphosis is quite important in the reading. The metamorphosis of the character internally and the metamorphosis of the city because of the flood. And then she would notice that things began to change little by little. The pavement was damp. You had holes that were becoming larger and larger. And in contrast, before making her way along the street, can you go on, please? You would notice in this section that you have the first reference to the trees and to the beautiful little trees, in contrast to the change of the city because of the flood. Now, how do we analyze her reaction and what she does? She says she would amuse herself by gazing at the beautiful little trees. She would count them. Who would usually do that? What kind of person would usually do that? What kind of person would usually count the trees?
The person who doesn't have anything in life, is not busy, he has a lot of stuff.
But she's going to work. She's on her way to work. What other argument can you give me?
She's a nature lover. She's not interested in people who come across the street only. She's interested to look at the nature.
Okay, that would be a very good possibility. Another possibility would be a child usually would count the trees. So she has some kind of childish innocence, but she is a lover of nature, and we're going to see that all along in the reading. And then what would be the impact of nature on her? They would bring in joy to her heart whenever I looked at them. So nature would bring her joy. So it's typical of maybe of a romantic period where nature would bring joy. She would be happy to look at them and to look at nature. Then something happens, and then next paragraph, then one day I counted them. There is a change also in the city, not only when it comes to the flood, but also in relation to cutting some of the trees. That one of the 9 Indian fig trees had disappeared, and how does she react to that? What comparison that she come up with? How does she compare it to? What does she compare it to? It had been uprooted, thrown down on the pavement, amidst the
That bird with no purpose.
Okay, a harmless bird that had been killed for no purpose. So notice what she's doing to the tree. She's rather than dealing with them as object. She deals with them as creature with a life. Maybe dealing with them not as a person but as birds. So this is the second reference to birds, to life. And what was her reaction? She wept bitterly. Would it be a normal reaction, even for a
Exaggerated reaction.
okay,
Okay.
exaggerated? What would be the purpose of showing us this exaggerated reaction? She's overly emotional, okay, but what would be the function of that? What do you think the author wanted to do when to show us that she's overreacting? Is it to condemn her, or is it to for another purpose? Is it to show us that she's crazy? What would be the other possible reason? By exaggerating, the reactions of people when it comes to cutting trees or elements of nature, it would show us that somebody overreacts. It means that there is something really wrong in the matter, that people are not allowed to destroy nature. Or maybe another reaction would be that she is misunderstood and people would not understand her emotional reaction and her closeness to nature. Remember, we said at one point that she feels closer to nature than she feels to people and maybe human beings. And then what happens to her? She starts having headaches and then pains in the head, pains that accompanied her all the time. And when she sees a doctor, and then it was then that I went to the doctor. Quite important. You would see the closeness, how the external environment would affect her. Basically, that she had chronic inflammation of the intestine because of nervous tension. And notice what she says, a very important sentence. I did not know exactly what had come over me, nor what calamity has befallen my city or the people in it. Notice, my city, she did not understand what had happened to her city, or the people in it. And she started gaining weight, she became obese, and she lost what? What kind of description do we have here? A description of a person who is what? Emotionally depressed, maybe. She did not want to go out with her women friends. Notice how she conversed with my women friends. She does not mention friends. She talks about women friends. What would be the indication to say women friends? That maybe in such a society,
She has maybe conflicts with man, or her relation with man is not good. She is alienated from man, maybe.
or maybe the possibility that it's not seen right to go out for a woman. She cannot have men friends, as you see in the chat. And in her society, in a patriarchal society, it's okay to go out to the movies with a woman friend, but not with a man friend. And the issue of marriage, which is so important for women living in patriarchal societies. So what do we have? What kind of conception of marriage does she have? How does it change her previous conception and her conception now? Isn't it strange, her ideas? What does she relate marriage to? She would not want to have marriage.
Having kids.
Children.
Hmm? I couldn't hear you.
Having children.
Parents. Yes, go ahead.
It's okay, yalla.
We were saying the same thing. We were saying having children.
Yeah, but having children where? In what kind of setting?
The city.
The city.
In a gray and brown city.
Exactly, in a grey and brown city. Remember when she was describing the asylum, she was talking about the grey walls. So is it normal as a reaction when you want to get married? If you decide to get married, would you take that into consideration, the place where you're going to live, whether it has trees or not? What would be your reaction usually?
Consider the place, but not based on trees and nature, maybe based on other standards.
Okay, maybe on other standards, or some people would still say that they would like to, maybe some people would focus on the person they're getting married to. Somebody would focus on, they would want their kids to have a place to play, to see nature. But here maybe she would exaggerate on purpose, maybe for rhetorical purpose. The author would show us this kind of reaction. And notice what she says: I was even more afraid for my grandchildren, and then who came out into the world and lived in a city without seeing a flower or meaning or knowing the meaning of the word. Isn't it an exaggeration? Even in a city, people will still be able to see a flower and to know the meaning of the word. So maybe it's an exaggeration to show us that in that kind of society, people are not taking care of nature. So maybe we can say that this reading has an environmental purpose to push people to see how nature is important, to preserve the environment, to preserve nature, the trees, the flowers, not only for people who are living now, but for future generation. Next paragraph, besides those who presented themselves, what kind of ideal husband does she have in mind? And is it unusual? Usually some women would run after what? What would be the criteria?
Well,
Here she wants him to like she wants her husband to love nature.
And to love the
Uh,
city and to love nature?
This is irony, and usually women expect men to be rich and has money, to be powerful. Here she regards him
Okay.
only as loving nature.
Okay, so to be handsome, to be rich, to be powerful, to have a certain kind of status socially. But here, unlike other women, she would want to have a man who would be different, a young man who loved the city as I did. We go back to the issue of topophilia, who would not get bored in counting trees on a warm summer evening, and then somebody who would understand what she does, who would not get bored of her because she does that, and then she would dream of this kind of young man, and then who would accompany her as they walked hand in hand in the city street, chatting away and as we ate monkey nuts. A simple life, a simple relation. She's not saying, I would like to go live in the village. She likes to live in the city, but she also likes the natural element in the city. And she narrates her story later on of what happens with one of her colleagues. Nevertheless, who can interpret what happens? Again, what is different from other outings with men, with young men? When he asked her to sit at the river edge, she would rather be even closer to the water. She would like to sit at the river's edge, and watch the water making its way aimlessly to the sea. What else? What happens? He's a conventional and a traditional man, you say, because of what? Because she is the one who kisses him.
Because she is
He didn't want to show
because
affection in
she is
public.
Okay, and then he doesn't want to show affection or love in public. It would be regarded as shameful in a traditional, conventional society. Both of them are angry, and they stop talking to each other. So maybe had it been a man who would kiss her, who would have the first move, would the reaction be the same? Maybe because it was degrading for him, for a woman to kiss him first. Okay, because he lives in a patriarchal society, and then he was angry also, and maybe because of the external element, how people would perceive them, and because he says she was doing such a thing in a public place, maybe he would have accepted it in a private place, and that would show you what? The hypocrisy, the double standards that men might have in a traditional society. Okay, so maybe it's a criticism of mentalities of men in a traditional society. Had she kissed him privately, maybe he would have accepted it. Next paragraph, what brought me to their notice. Notice here her closeness to nature. The closeness to nature is so strong that she even dreams of the return of the beautiful green trees and the flowers and all of that. In her unconscious mind, nature would still play a major role. And what happened? She's late to work. She forgot to wear a bra, and she doesn't want to be late for work. And it seemed to me that not coming back home that day confirmed everything that was said to me about being eccentric, set off me of being eccentric and not caring about my work. So here we're dealing with identity, what she is and the way they perceive her. Okay, so identity, how people, what you are and how people perceive you. And what happened next? I stopped. Thank you. What kind of reaction do we have here? What is she questioning? What is she
Societal
questioning?
norms.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Societal norms.
Exactly, societal norms, the way people should be dressed. And then she's questioning the code basically. And then what's wrong with going out without a bra? It's a funny piece of clothing, really funny. And then it would be stupid to insist on putting their breast into them. And what's so shameful? The way people would perceive you, whether it's shameful or not to be dressed in a certain way or not. And she says she moves on. When she moves, how do we analyze the man's reaction, the boss's reaction? Is it justified? Is she innocent? Doesn't she know what happened to him? Why does she ask him if he's ill or not? How do we interpret her reaction and his reaction?
Because for her, it is not wrong to go out without a bra, but he's a man, he thinks like other people in society.
Okay, because they live in a conventional society, so basically it is shocking for him, and he cannot even, talk to her about it. This is why he calls another colleague whose name is Nadia. Okay, who can answer? What kind of answer would you? He says that she's naive because she is surprised, she's shocked that her because of the boss's reaction. What would be another argument?
I think that all through the text, we've seen that she has a lot of childlike behaviors. She has this innocence of a child, so I think that would justify her not knowing what's happening with the man. And because she doesn't, in her head, she's not really conventional. She doesn't feel this connection to humans, so she doesn't know human reaction, or because she doesn't have that interaction with human.
Okay, very good arguments because she has a childlike reaction throughout in the reading, and then because of her closeness to nature, and maybe the natural way would be not to wear any kind of clothes, any kinds of bras, and then maybe because she realizes that she doesn't realize that she's living in such a patriarchal society. The fact that she kissed the man would prove it, because usually it's not done in public, especially a woman who would do it and not a man. And here also, with the reaction of the boss, it's something strange to her, because maybe even though she's living in a patriarchal society, the way she thinks would differ from other people. What about Nadia and the way she scolds her? What does she stand for? Is the reading divided into men versus women, or it's also conventional women and men in contrast to maybe more modern women? How would you interpret it?
It's definitely the contrast between conventional and not conventional or not traditional, because الreaction تبع Nadia, she seems very convinced of it. It's not, there isn't any kind of feminist approach to this. It's like, oh, okay, this is the way Mr. Aziz reacted is very normal, whereas in comparison, she doesn't understand why Nadia is like this, and she gets frustrated. So it's definitely conventional versus not traditional.
Okay, can we say that indecent manner, isn't it an exaggeration to view her behavior as indecent, that you would punish me for behaving in an indecent manner? How can we interpret indecent?
But doctor, this is the real case in real life. That's how people deal with each other.
Okay, then this is how they deal with each other, but isn't it going too far to say that she's indecent? Just because of what she was wearing?
She's not showing anything. It's just a braless, she didn't flash anyone. She didn't do anything. It is very exaggerated, even if it's present in society, in the workplace, but the reaction is exaggerated.
It is exaggerated to call her maybe immoral and behaving in an immoral manner.
Indecent with respect to the boss. It's not something true. It's something biased or something subjective.
But the boss reflects the society. One of Celine is saying indecency is a social concept in the sense that it means different things in different country. Of course, had she been in a different country, maybe the reaction would not be the same. But can we say it's regardless of the country, it's a dress code in a company? That even in the West, you're supposed to be dressed in a certain manner when you go to work. Outside, you can get dressed the way you want to. So, but then in that case, you would not call it indecent. You would give it a different kind of description. The word indecent would give it immoral connotations. And do we see that she's an immoral person? Who would say she's immoral?
No, she's not immoral. She's very innocent about it. And also, doctor, I would like to point out, no, isn't this the reductive materialistic approach of society and how they perceive women?
Exactly how they perceive women, all based on appearance, all based on the body. They judge the person based on the way she dresses or what she does not wear. But basically, what if you had somebody who would be dressed in a conventional way and who would behave immorally, but nobody would know it? Okay, because people would not be judging that person based on clothing. Okay, so this is basically sweeping generalization to judge a person internally, ethically, based on how she is dressed. Okay, which one would be a proper accusation of indecent behavior rather than not wearing a bra? Can we say that kissing the man, the colleague, would be called immoral? More appropriate to be called immoral? If you compare the two incidents.
If you're taking it from the view of the society, yes, no, it's more immoral to kiss the man than to go out to work without,
A bra.
to go out to work braless.
Okay, so that would be immoral because she's doing it in public, and then something that's not allowed. And here in Arab society, it's considered okay immoral. It depends on the society. Okay, I will stop here to just because